Good afternoon, everyone. You're hanging out with Joe Leonardo and Alexander Turbin. We're comic books from coast to coast. I'm Joe Leonardo. I'm over here on the West Coast. I'm hanging out with my boy Alexander Turbin. He's over on the East Coast. How are you doing today, Alexander?
I'm doing really good. It's been nice the last few days, so I've been gardening and we've been opening the pool and all kinds of awesome summer stuff. So, but that cuts into my
Awesome.
comic book work, and so that kind of is a bummer. And
Everything does,
also
man.
and also more of a bummer, which it seems like. Does it seem to you like a lot of comic book people are dying, or is it just me?
No, I mean we're reaching that age where it's like there's a lack of replenishment, and even now, like when you look at like guys that are like say, like people who I don't want to call them new discoveries, obviously, because a lot of these guys have been around for a while, but like, it takes people time to marinate in the industry. And sometimes a person may never come to the surface, very much in
Yeah.
attention. And, sometimes it might take a person years for them to come to the surface for the attention. But like, say, someone like Jorge Mendez, who's like a really awesome, pretty modern creator. He's done a lot of stuff for Marvel, a lot of stuff for DC. His art is super rad. He's a mostly digital guy, but he could totally do, he's a real artist and he could draw, with a pencil and paper too. But he's an older dude, you know what I mean? He's like a guy in his
Yeah.
late
Yeah.
40s, early 50s, you know what I mean? And it's like you don't see any like 20-year-olds, you don't see any like, oh, this brand new dude who's blowing up the scene and he's 19 years old. You never see that no more, hardly.
Well, I think they are out there, but we're not paying attention to them. I think they're in the comic book stores and people that buy new books. Like neither you or I like. I get extreme, not extreme. Some I think it's Extreme X-Men. Like my wife got me subscriptions to some new X-Men and Carnage and stuff, and I kind of read them. But they're not really. I'm not enjoying them so much. But I think in the comic book stores, there's a lot of modern stuff that you and I are not really aware of.
Oh, well, for sure. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff that's outside your window that you never know it's probably having big success. It's not like I was super aware of Walking Dead's success, you know what I mean, until after the
Yeah,
TV show premiered, and then it kind of like
yeah, yeah,
you start to realize, oh, like this is a whole thing. Okay, so like this was a comic first. Like, all right, let's explore this
yeah,
idea and see, and it's cool to see that there's still people out there creating stuff that's still marinating and enough to where like society is looking at it and being like, oh yeah, we appreciate this and we accept this and we're interested and we want to go down this rabbit hole with you or whatever. And like Kirkman had that success with Walking Dead and Invincible. And I
yeah, yeah,
honestly, like I said, I believe personally that is all based on long-term storytelling where the characters have you know actual problems that stick and stay. You know what I mean? The results of any situation stay with you over the term of the story instead of constantly being, refreshed every 6 months, with
yeah, yeah,
setting new ideas that wipe away everything that just occurred in the story. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's long
yeah.
term storytelling where the ideas stick and there's consequences to the things that happen. I think that's what gets people involved. And, people will be like, oh, it's because it has naked girls or, oh, it's because it has violence. And it's like maybe those are, elements of it here or there. But I always think like it's the same thing. That's why manga does so much better than, modern era comics because like their stories stick to a long-term story idea and there's consequences, and whenever those consequences take place they remain relevant in the universe over time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think anything that has quality is going to people are going to like. I mean, uh,
That too.
Invincible does have a lot of stuff that shock value. The violence and the his dad being the bad guy and all this stuff. That's kind of shock value, but it's really kind of like there would if that was all there was to it, there wouldn't be a second or third season. It's got to be stuff that people enjoy. After the shock value, is over. Pretty much after the shtick is done, you have to either have the quality and keep going, or it just peters out,
That's
kind
what I
of.
mean. There has to be like story, and a lot of times
Yeah,
it's cool when when they have bigger involving ideas and they approach it in small incremental ways where they might fool you into thinking it's one thing and then really reusing that to bring about another idea. And I have to say, like, Kirkman did that pretty well with Invincible. Because, like, in the beginning, I thought, like, oh, it has all that graphic violence in it. And you're like, dude, does it really, this is not really necessary in a comic book. But, like,
Right.
he kind of used it to say, like, oh, this is this character's story arc. Here at the beginning, he's learning, and this violent stuff is like, it's a learning curve. He's thinking like, oh, this violence is power or whatever, but the real power is like being, above all that stuff or whatever, or
Right.
being like
Right.
powerful enough to
Right.
turn away from the fact that you have the ability to do that to every person you come across or whatever. You know what I mean? And then the
Yeah.
story,
Yeah.
then through these little things, you create stories that are interesting and the character becomes more evolved, and that's good storytelling, like.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so let's hop into today's discussion, which is last week we lost Peter David, and I have a little bit more um, knowledge of him than you do, I guess. He was really popular. Like this is probably his most popular comic was the Hulk. Obviously because Todd McFarlane jumped on there with him, but he had he was on there for quite a while. He was like maybe on there for 100 or so issues. Peter
I want to
David
say that
writing it.
I heard it was like 12 years or 10 years or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
it's something huge amount, and he always made it interesting. There's always interesting and fresh ideas, and like you can say that an artist makes a book or an artist makes a series, whatever. But he had after McFarlane was Dale Keown, and they had some other artists. This one is one of the Kubert brothers, I think. I don't know if he does the interiors, but the cover is the Kubert, Adam Kubert. So, I mean, whether or not the writer makes the success of the comic or whether the artist does, that's going to be an age-old debate. I certainly think the X-Men, obviously for me, was successful in my eyes because of Chris Claremont, not because of the every awesome, amazing artist that was on it afterwards.
You think so?
100%, 100,000%, 100 million%. I mean,
I'll go ahead.
what's that?
Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I mean, his depth of stories and his characterization, and like you just lived with these characters, and yes, the art really made it great. Like I love John Romita Jr.'s art. I love it. He's fantastic. He does narrative art fantastically. But I think you put in almost any other artist in with Chris Claremont, and he's gonna dig the awesomeness out of the artist, and he's also going to tell an awesome, amazing story, and whether the art is good or not.
Yeah, I think he spun his wheels a lot, but he did tell cool stories. You know what I mean? Like he just I think like he laid down too many threads myself. You know what I mean? Like he was just
yeah,
like, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
just be like sometimes these things would never even go anywhere or whatever, and you'd
yeah,
just be laying
yeah,
down
yeah.
threads.
But that
Never
was
spun
some of the
anything.
awesomeness, though. Like in the the last page of a story, it would have something like the beginning of where he introduced Nimrod, who was the futuristic Sentinel. That was like it started as the last page of a story, and then he didn't continue it until like 4 or 5 or 6 7 issues later. So he would have all of these threads going on, but they almost always came wrapped around and came together, which was one of the great things. But I mean, we're here to talk about Peter David, and one of the great things about Peter David, because I read him in the Hulk. I didn't read. He also did Spider-Man 2099. I kind of feel like that was a company project where they were just like, we've got this theme going and it's 2099 and we want you to do Spider-Man 2099. He's like, all right, I'll do it. Kind of like they did with all that new universe stuff. They just gave people ideas or whatever, characters or storylines, and they were like, you do it, just do it. And they're like, okay, I'll do it because you're paying me.
Basically, I mean, that's the way Marvel. You know what? That's kind of like the bummer, about this guy. As I was looking into his Wikipedia a bit, and it looks like he had lost his Medicaid, or his Medicaid got denied. You know what I mean? Here at the very end of his health, or whatever, and
Really,
he had something.
Peter
Yeah.
David?
Yes,
but he wasn't
and
rich.
that's what I'm saying. So that's my exact point. Because
Man.
he was on Medicaid. Yeah, no insurance from the company, no
Yeah,
long-term insurance taking care of him, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, Medicaid had denied his whatever medical expenses. They
yeah,
were
yeah. That's
his family
horrible.
was trying to run a GoFundMe, to help pay for his stuff. He had
Yeah,
suffered, I guess, a couple strokes and some kidney failure. I guess is what did him in eventually.
that's
And
just horrible.
that's just super insanely sad to think that someone
Yeah,
who created so much, prolific material for a company like that was not protected, was not looked after, didn't retire with a, you know what I mean, with a quality of
yeah,
life thing
yeah,
behind him, you know what I mean, after
yeah,
doing so much work. I mean, the dude he wrote Babylon 5,
yeah, yeah. He did a lot of episodes of different sci-fi
Star Trek.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
yep,
wrote,
yeah,
novels. I think
yeah,
he wrote some of the
yeah.
Star Trek
Yeah,
novels,
here's a Star Trek novel, Strike Zone. He did multiple novels. I don't know how many he did, but he did at least 20 or 30 or something like that.
And
Some
on top of
really
that,
big
I know
number.
he wrote some of his own stuff too. Like, there was some, of his own ideas that he novelized as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And after all that, he was still on, needing to be on Medicaid, medical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That which is really too bad. I was looking him up too. And obviously I knew a bunch of his stuff. And but one of the things that I looked up and Googled was characters that he created. And there really weren't for all of the years that he created comic books, there's not a lot of characters that he created. And I
Well,
kind of think that that's where the money is, creating
I
characters.
don't know, man. I don't know. I don't think that's right at all, dude. I don't think you get anything more for creating the characters. They don't give you nothing for that, dude. You
No,
know what I
no,
mean? Like,
I'm not saying Marvel giving you money. Although they have that whole thing with Superman's Schuster's nephew or whatever, saying he wants more money, and I mean DC did help the Schuster and Simon when the first movie came out back in the 70s
yeah, but
or
not on their
80s.
own. They did it because
No, no,
Neil
not
Gaiman
on
and
their own.
Frank
Right.
Miller shamed them into doing it.
Yeah, 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 definitely. But I think that as a creator, I think characters are where the money is as far as comic books.
I guess I don't see how that translates myself, but like
Well, if
maybe.
you got a great character, it's like McFarlane. What do you think of McFarlane when you're not thinking of Marvel stuff?
Well, obviously it's Spawn. It's the only
Spawn.
thing he
Yeah,
ever did.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean that he's done a whole bunch of other characters, but I mean
Yeah,
when
but
you hit a
now I
character,
want you to stop and think. What would have happened to him if he'd made Spawn over at Marvel?
right,
They'd have
nothing,
made all that
nothing.
money, and he
He
would
would
have
have
got
ended
nothing
up with
from it.
yeah, yeah, true. And I mean we
They
could
would have
go into
trillions, and
this.
he'd have nothing. You know.
Yeah, yeah, we could go into this whole we could go into, whether Marvel and DC, treat their people right, which we obviously all know that they don't and didn't.
Actually,
And
I've heard that DC is way better. Like everybody says that DC is way better than Marvel. You know what I mean? Like DC pays their royalties way faster. They pay
right.
more. They pay more per page. You know what I mean? They're more willing to make deals where the creators keep control of their stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
To a certain
yeah.
extent. Where Marvel is just like they want everything. Like
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure nowadays they treat their creators better than they did. But I mean both of them back in the day didn't, treat their creators well. And I mean all comic book creators have been treated like garbage by the publishers all through
yeah, to a certain
from the
extent.
very beginning of comic books.
But this right here, this is the Peter David freaking piece right here. And you can see it's like a humor piece, like right off the back. It's got like a little bit of like, it's not, you know what I mean? It's like it's called I'm Drowning in Paperwork or whatever,
What
and
what book is that?
this is it's
Oh,
X
X Factor.
Factor
Yeah,
annual
yeah,
Shatter Shot, it's like
yeah, yeah,
super size, like 74 pages or something like that. And it's got like
yeah,
three big stories in it, like one
yeah,
main story, which is the Joe Quesada one I was just paging through, it's got this beautiful Bill Sienkiewicz freaking pinup right here.
yeah,
And then this is the Peter David, one or whatever. And it's, she's like, doing a bunch of paperwork, and then the paperwork's getting bigger and bigger, you know what I mean? And she's like, slowly like drowning, the paperwork's becoming, alive or whatever, and then she's
Yeah.
like fighting
Yeah.
the paperwork, and then like until eventually the paperwork's like an avalanche, like following her out of the building and attacking her like a dragon or whatever. And then
Yeah.
eventually, at the very end, you see it's just a dream. She wakes up from
Yeah.
it or whatever.
Yeah.
But
It's really difficult to show and explain a writer for comic books unless you're really digging into the nuts and bolts of the storyline and the dialogue and all of that stuff that go into the writing of the comic. It's really difficult.
like I said, I'm not familiar with the guy's work, but everything I read about him was like talking about he had this like really great sense of character, and that he was really good with like breathing humor into comic books that felt natural and didn't feel forced and that kind of thing. And you can see that in this little bit right here. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
very sort of like, it's got a fun little humor to it. It's got a fun certain level of drama to it or whatever. You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
a superhero story where it's a Val Cooper. I'm not sure who that character is. Like, I'm sure people out there know
Yeah.
who Val
I
Cooper is.
Yeah, Val Cooper, she's an X-Men person. She got the Evil Mutants, turned him into Freedom Force and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, she's a
Okay,
big
so
X-Men
she's some sort
character.
of bureaucrat or whatever, and
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
drowning in paperwork here, at the office. You know what I mean? And she's having some sort of anxiety dream about the paperwork coming to life and attacking her. But it's a fun idea, and I'm just saying, like, you see the guy's humor and the guy's liveliness, like just in a little tiny bit like this, and this is only
Yeah.
like an 8-page story.
Yeah. 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 He learned really on. I mean, to be a comic book writer is like you and I are comic book writers and artists, so we kind of think that way automatically. I can't imagine not being an artist and thinking about writing comic books. I mean, I guess it's like doing a movie or a TV show or whatever. So you think along those narrative lines, but to think of a panel or a panel by panel progression and how the storyline kind of goes along and stuff. I don't know how much of all of these books are from the artist doing them or from him saying I want this panel, this page, this panel, this page kind of thing.
Yeah, because like I've seen writers work in both ways. You know what I mean? I've seen
Yeah.
writers work in broad strokes. You know what I mean? Where it'll just be
Yeah.
like, oh, midnight, moon high in the sky, over a set of trees, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it'll just be like
Yeah.
basic breakdown ideas. And then I've seen other guys that are like panel one, a large eyeball, drawn
Yeah.
into where we see, you know what I mean? It'll be like, and
Yeah.
they're very specific or whatever. Like, so I mean,
What's up, Byron?
oh, hey, what's going on, Byron? It's cool to see you. Always glad when you guys stop by and say hey.
Yeah, yeah. Byron, are you a Peter David fan? But yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah, Alan Moore is famous for having really, really intricate um, everything. Like
Yeah, yeah.
says if somebody's sitting on a park bench, he'll be like, "There's things etched in the park bench," and all of this crazy
I've
stuff.
also heard that he sends like he will draw breakdowns of the page
Yeah,
sometimes too. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so at
yeah,
that point, I
yeah,
don't really want to work with you. You know what I mean? Because I'm not trying to just draw your stuff. You know what I mean? Like I have my
yeah,
own
yeah,
vision for things, and I'm not really interested in just being like, oh, like you're like you have a vision in your head, and you're not interested in what anybody else has to put into it. And you're just like. It's like then you should become a better artist, is what I say. You know what I mean? If you want it to be in that exact way, because it's like I don't want to just draw on your exact ideas. It's like I got my own ideas. You tell me what you think it should be or whatever, and
yeah,
I'll try and get close to that, and then we'll have to work together and meet somewhere in between because I'm not like interested in just being like, oh,
yeah, yeah.
freaking like your ideas alone. If I didn't tell you who this was, what would you think that is?
I would think that's uh what's his name? Rob Liefeld.
It does look a bit like Rob Liefeld. That's heck of funny. They're totally doing some weird Calvin and Hobbes thing there or something. That just
Yeah,
now like
yeah.
popping into my head.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
realizing
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
super early Joe Madureira.
Oh, is it? That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a weird thing when you're doing comic books with other people and like an artist and writer working together, and you have to kind of agree on that balance of what you're gonna do.
Mhm.
It's like, I mean, you talk about the Marvel method where the writer just kind of discusses a little bit what they want, and then the artist goes and does everything. You don't want that either. So there has to be a nice balance, I think.
Well,
Me
it
personally me
just
personally, I would do whatever Alan Moore told me to. I'd be like,
I
"I'm there."
yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just depends. It just depends. I've seen Alan Moore do stuff that's insanely good. He's just like anybody. It's like he's a very talented writer, obviously. You know what I mean? Just taking a quick look at the latest issue of Funk that Alexander Turbin has printed out with a bunch of independent underground artists that we work with. Really cool stuff.
Yeah,
Really great printing on this too, Alex.
yeah. Thank you.
But yeah,
Because
it just depends. Like,
one of the things that Peter David does though is he really knows how to, like, he will comics in particular, like when you're introducing a character. And I was kind of thinking about this today because I was drawing one of my characters for the very first time that I've had like forever, and one of the things when you introduce a character, like, and I think that it was a thing that Peter David and Todd McFarlane worked on together, where they would introduce a character, and like the first time you saw him, he would be all in silhouette, so you wouldn't know who would. Kind of like when a bad guy, you see them in the background or whatever in a silhouette, and then later on they kind of reveal that they're like a big reveal. So he kind of does that as the writer, showing the big reveal. It's like having a really good splash page where it's a big surprise. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely. I think that is the right approach at any given. Especially when you're trying to introduce something or whatever. I think like in the, like in like say like right here, like in the beginning of Six Lords or whatever. It's
Yeah,
like I'm building up to the character or whatever, and it's like, oh, first you get like let me see if I'm even in frame here. Yeah, I am. Like first you get this little glimpse of the bad guy, you know what I mean? And it's just his hand in
yeah,
his eyes, and then the next shot of him is just from the back, you know what I mean? Where you're getting a little bit more, and now hopefully getting you interested in the idea, you know what I mean? And then
yeah,
you finally get the full reveal, but even still, or like the next shot is just a close up of the face, and then finally, after 4 pages in, you get the full reveal, which is, whatever, like, you know what I mean? But like, that's, always, you kind of want to, like, when you're introducing someone powerful or something interesting, you know what I mean? You don't never
yeah.
just like bring it full into frame, like right off the back or
Right,
whatever. You want to
right.
like slowly reveal that kind of thing over,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
period of
yeah.
time,
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do things, and that's certainly one of the types of ways you can do it. Um, but yeah, one of the things that I remember from Peter David was he wrote an article in Comic Buyer's Guide. Have you ever read Comic Buyer's Guide?
I can't say I've ever read it. No, I
It was a
haven't.
weekly it was a
I know
weekly
what it is.
newspaper.
Yeah, I just never
You
read it.
have you have I
I
had
mean,
a
I bought them
subscription.
back in the day.
Yeah, I
Probably
had a
had a couple of
subscription
them.
back in the nine early 90s, late 80s, and I loved it. I mean, I would just read it, because there was no internet back then. We're so lucky now to be able to post some our art or whatever and get instant recognition, gratification, or some other kind of input. There wasn't anything like that back then. So to have a comic book fan resource was just awesome, and he had some really great articles. And it kind of got you kind of learned a little bit more about him than just his regular writing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't like I mean, didn't he have like quite a few like where he would like complain, like he's kind of known for being like a bit of a grumpy old curmudgeon or something like
Yeah,
that, because he
yeah,
would
yeah. He
always
bitched
complain
about
about the
everything.
industry or whatever.
Yeah, But that's one of the things that really made him good and enjoyable to read. And like it's like Byron was saying, he only knew him for the argument he had with Todd McFarlane about what was more important, the art or the writing in a comic book. And they had a big debate at San Diego Comic Con and stuff. And everyone overwhelmingly said Peter David won. But I think that was just because McFarlane had poor debating skills.
Is that right? I do somewhat legendarily recall that taking place. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
battle
I mean,
between two titans.
because a comic book with no pictures is not a comic book, but a
No,
comic book with no words can still be a comic book.
yeah, but it's a better when it has good words with it. You know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
definitely better when it.
it can definitely be a comic book even without words for sure. But just to stop on the chat here, like Byron from Adventures of Brat Girl was just saying that the Six Swords of Sound book looks super brutal, and he's asking me when I could get my hands on one. And actually, I am definitely going to have more printed, and Alex is going to be printing some for me
Yep.
shortly. I have to pay him a $20 payment, which I was supposed to pay this weekend, but I ran out of cash.
Well,
doing
I
some
don't
other
know. I
stuff.
don't know. We're gonna have to discuss that. I'm not entirely sure that would be the best process.
What do you mean?
Well, getting that different paper, I don't know about that.
Well, even if it
I'll
doesn't
have
work
to.
out, just let me know. Like, I still want you to print
Yeah,
them. You know what
yeah.
I mean?
Oh
So,
yeah. Well, you already gave me money for the
well,
regular
yeah.
printing,
But if you
so
need me to throw you another, $20 or whatever, or something, like if you want to, or like, we could just experiment and do like 5 of them on that paper or something like that, or just print one out
yeah,
on the
yeah,
paper, you know what I mean, to see how it
yeah,
comes. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Maybe it'll
yeah.
look better than you
Well,
thought, or, like, I'm
yeah,
more than willing
it's
to
stuff
pay
that
for
I
that.
have to get though.
I'm just saying. Yeah, I know. And
Yeah,
I'm certainly not trying to, like, get you to hurry either.
yeah, yeah.
Take as long as you
Well,
need
we
to
don't.
print those out. But I do know that I have along with Byron, I have like a handful of people that are also trying to get their hands on this first copy of Sith Lord still. So I do have
Yeah,
some printing pretty soon, you guys, and we will have some down the pipeline not too terribly long from now.
yeah.
I got Alex working on it.
Yeah, it's in the process. I mean, because you still have to do the
I was gonna
you're
say I
still
haven't even
doing
sent you
the
the scans for it yet, because one of
yeah,
the things that slowed me down is like, yeah, I have to rescan the entire book and it's 36 pages, and I just haven't had the chance to get it all done. I have the first like 15 of it done. I have to go and get the other half of it freaking scanned, and then double check the scans and make sure they're all good before I send them all off to you. And I wanted to make sure that they were all, like correct before, and have them all lined up and stuff, and send them all off
yeah,
once so that they don't get separated. Because I know your email is always busy from Funk and from everything else. I mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
Pretty
I
much.
definitely will get you a copy as soon as possible, Byron. Like, as soon as the copies come out, I will definitely get you one. So don't worry, brother. Like, I got you on my list, and I appreciate you being like so interested in the product.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's awesome. So yeah, he definitely worked with some fantastic artists. This is early Dale Keown stuff, and I almost like this more than any of the other Dale Keown stuff that I've seen.
I was gonna say, like, I know like Dale Keown and Todd McFarlane are the two guys that like really sort of like were able to help. Like they melded with the writer best or whatever, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it helps when you really love the character. Like if you were doing Superman for DC, you would like put every part of your
Yeah.
soul into it. Just
Yes.
like if I was doing the X-Men for Marvel. I mean,
Yeah.
I would be doing the best work that I ever possibly could.
You just have to be like, okay, I just have to sleep like 2 hours a night, and that's just all there is to it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yep. So there you go. Talking about Peter David and
Yeah, it's so
how
sad that like someone to him. I think the real thing with him, before we take off here, is that it sucks that it's just I wish that maybe he had done his own thing. You know what I mean? Like someone with imagination like his. I wish Babylon 5 had belonged to him exclusively, and that he could have made published it as a comic book for 10 years, and you know what I mean? Like I wish all that money would just been exclusively went to him. Because like it just sucks that at the end of his life that this guy who provided so much joy for so many people and was like such a talented dude and whose talent was always on display, it just sucks that in the end. I mean, 68 years is not that long to live. And, dying from health care conditions because you were denied care from your medical insurance is
Yeah,
a horrific
yeah,
reality of modern America that should just like, it's a travesty that is taking place,
yeah,
or that,
yeah.
we're dealing with that as a people right now. So sorry,
So
Peter
yeah,
David, that society let you down.
yeah,
We wish
yeah.
you
No kidding.
freaking, your family condolences, and, just want to stop
Yeah,
and say
yeah,
we love your work
yeah.
and that we miss you and we love you, bro.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you bring up a huge point that we're definitely going to have to look at more is the work for hire versus doing your own stuff. And I mean, because you when you're working for hire, you've got the backing of the biggest comic book companies in the world, and and editors, staff, computers, everything. And if you're doing it on your own or with a smaller company or whatever, you just don't have those resources. So less people are going to see it. You're going to make like we both say we wish that he had done that, but he made. I'm assuming he made a living on his, work for hire stuff, and to be able to write comic books for a living. I mean, I think both you and I would jump at that chance.
Yeah, I guess it's its own adventure. You know what I mean? It's just like anybody. I mean, you only get so much time, and you got to put your cards on the table and play the game. At some point. You know what I mean? And there's just like, I mean, you never know what you're going to get. I guess just like Forrest Gump said, we hope for the
Yeah,
best, but just like
yeah.
with most things in life, you hope for the best and expect the worst, and land somewhere in between. And that's what we call life these days.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. All right, so you want to get us out of here?
Um, well, just touch base real quick. I'm Joe Leonardo. I'm the creator of Six Lords of Sound. And like I was just paging through this, you guys. Six Lords of Sound is epic superheroes in space, sort of Jim Starlin inspired. Like this guy right here, Master Blaster. He's basically a version of Adam Warlock, even. Very inspired by the Jim Starlin stuff. Whole bunch of other things. 1970s heavy metal and metal fantasy and superheroes like X-Men and just everything cool that you could think of all smashed into one cool story. Um, Me and Alexander Turbin are currently working on this project. This is the Entropy Alliance, and it's basically, I mean, if you could believe it, we're ballsy enough to just be like, we're creating our own in-game level Crisis on Infinite Earth level uh, end of the universe comic book story with a bunch of characters that we made up when we were kids. You know what I mean? Like when we were like teenagers and when we were little kids. And when other people are out there, just doing little parodies of stuff, and other people out there just like, doing little 2 or 3 pages, man, me and Alex are gonna sit down and just like approach us just like if you were like looking at what's one everybody Watchmen. It's just like you didn't know. No one who knew who the characters from Watchmen were until you sat down and read Watchmen. You know what I mean? Like no one knew who Doctor Manhattan was until we read Watchmen or Rorschach. And just like that, we're just introducing an entire universe, of characters, and just telling a big epic story. And hope you guys all come along for the ride because it's going to be a huge adventure. It's going to be a lot of fun. And Alex is already working on stuff. What are you working on right now, Alex?
This is the last issue of Random Access, or the newest issue, rather, or whatever, that hasn't gone out to patrons yet. So you can still join up at patreon.com/Alexander Turbin. And this is actually a reprint of, because there was a volume 1 of Random Access that went for 12 issues. And you can get those at my website, alexanderturbin.com. But this is actually color version of issue 10, which was um, the first appearance of the Death Knight. And this is actually a reworking of, I did a comic book back when I was like 13 or 14 or whatever, of the Death Knights. And it was basically it was a ripoff of Judge Dredd, pretty much. And but there are some scenes that like this scene right here is a panel by panel representation of or redoing of what I did back when I was 13, 14, whatever. And so I just kind of wanted to redo it. And I just kind of wanted to show the Death Knight as a modern iteration of teenage kind of or whatever, tween or whatever it is.
It's fantastic, man.
Thing.
Do you have the
So,
old one too? I want to see the old one at some point. Let's do a comparison side by side.
I have them on my Patreon. You can go to my Patreon and check them out. I think I might have given them away. I did like a whole. Did you do comics when you were when you were young, teenage or whatever?
You know, dude, I have a long history of like doing like 8 pages or 12 pages, but I'm a dude who's like, just like right now, I'd be like, I'm gonna do a 40-page or a 60-page story, and I'd get 8 pages in and just be like, just stop, you know.
Yeah,
So I have stories that start but never go anywhere, you know.
Yeah, I understand that. I kept doing like these 10-page things on typing paper or whatever, and they would just be penciled, no inks, and I would do them on both sides, pencil on both sides, and then I would have like the 11 by 17, and I'd make a cover, and like on the back cover it'd be like, coming soon, this character. I don't know if you saw my Instagram post where I had that rip off of Eddie from Iron Maiden. He was one of my main characters. One of my main characters back then was Ross.
What's his name? Am I thinking of Evil Ernie or whatever? Because Evil Ernie is kind of like a ripoff of Eddie, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. But no, it was really rip off. But
I mean,
you know,
dude, it's
who
so
cares?
fun to do
I
that
like
stuff,
it.
though. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, right here on the back of Six Lords, I have a fake ad. It's not fake. I guess it's a real ad, but it's a fake ad at the same time, you know. And this is Soaked in Blood that we did, you know, for
that's not fake.
Nathaniel J.K., you know, and this was the cover.
Yep.
And you know, I just made this mock-up, and it was like I was inspired to try and make an ad like you would have saw on Wizard back in the day or whatever, or something like that. You know what I mean? Freaking, it's like, instead of just doing like a back cover with a picture on it, I was like, let's make it an ad, because like that's more classic comic book, you know.
Yeah. So I always had advertisements for all of the different 10-page comic books that I was working on or whatever.
You even got an advertisement in here too, you know what I mean? And it's always cool because you always got something going on. But before we say goodbye, I just want to say thank you to Byron for coming by, and thank you for hitting up on the chat. Byron's just commenting that, you know, he thinks that you should definitely work for money when you can, but also do your work for, you know, yourself stuff on the side and publish that side stuff too, because you never know when that thing might make big money. You never know when you might be writing Spider-Man and then all of a sudden, you know, invent Ninja Turtles or something on the side. You want all that money for yourself if you ever do, you know. And then he's also just congratulating us and saying what a great live stream we had. And if we had a great live stream, dude, it's because, you know, you always come by and hang out with us, Byron. And we want to say thank you to everybody who comes by and hangs out. If you guys throw Alex a like, we really appreciate that. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Alexander's show. And be sure to join us next week. We're going to be looking at somebody cool. We're actually, when we get back to the artist tolls, we're going to be doing Jim Lee versus whoever won against the Kubert brothers. And we have some more cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Thank you for joining us today. We're Comic Books from Coast to Coast. I'm Joe Leonardo, and I'm hanging out with my buddy Alexander Turbin. Alex, go ahead and give them their marching orders, and we'll get the hell out of here.
Well, just like we always say, and this goes for everybody, artist, not artist, writer, not writer, anybody that's in comic books, keep on creating.